And a 1, and a 2, and a 3. And a 1, 2, 3. I believe we're live. I believe we're on. And I want to welcome everyone to your weekly Lovecraft Country spoiler review. My name's Phil, and let's get to it, guys, because there's so much to unpack on this episode. I'm just sharing this on one page, so just give me a second here at the start. Let's see if I missed the if I missed the deadline for the spoiler review. I just finished watching this about um I don't know, about 5 minutes ago. So it's still swirling in my mind. I have a feeling there will be people that will not like this episode as much as the first one, but I dug it. I dug it a lot. So let me just put something here in a group. Hey guys, just finished watching. If you want to join me to chat, I am on. All right, so I posted that in the Lovecraft group, and let's see if anybody comes on. It's a really nice group. It's a really fun group of people. But anyway, let's unpack this because there was so much going on in this episode, and it totally took me for a loop. It wasn't what I was expecting. I have purposely tried to stay as far away from even watching the previews or anything. As much as I don't mind spoilers too much. I'm a member of some spoiler groups for other series. I don't mind them too much. But this episode this show has gotten me far enough invested that I'm like, yo, I don't want to know what's coming next. I haven't read the book, although I'm thinking about finding myself a copy of it. So I have no clue what's coming. It totally took me for a loop because of that, and I'll tell you why in a second. So, to begin, recapping last episode, they went up there to quote unquote Lovecraft country to find Atticus's dad. They were not able to find Atticus's dad, but they were attacked by a whole bunch of racist folks, like every racist folk in America came across their path, or they came across the path of these racist folks. And eventually they arrived at this mansion, and the door was answered by a young gentleman named William, I believe. Uh, and I'm still trying to get all the names right, but I think it's William. I'm looking here on IMDb, so that kind of looks like him, Jordan Patrick Smith. And he invited him in, and that's where we pick up this episode, like right at this moment. And this show takes you for a loop, right? Because I'm thinking, all right, the rest of the season's gonna be the mysteries of this house. This house, like it's almost like a house of mirrors, where things aren't exactly what they seem, and they're gonna find some portal to some other dimensions inside this house by some of the previews which I have seen. I can't stay completely away from the previews, right? And wow, was I wrong, right? And as those of you who have watched the episode know, we are pretty much done with this house. But we'll see why when we get there. So when they get into the house, by the way, I love the opening segment with Moving On Up, which is the theme song to the Jeffersons, because they were so happy they were in this big ass mansion. But it gets serious real quick, right? Because we find out that in this house, they're being kept for a reason. What is this reason? Is it good reasons or bad reasons? We don't know at the start, but it starts to unravel that it's not exactly for good reasons. This house ends up was owned by the Braithwrights. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. The Braithwaites. Okay, and at first I thought it was birthright because in the a lot of the promos they kept saying this birthright is ours, this birthright is ours. But maybe they were saying this Braithwaite is ours, and I was just not hearing correctly. But we find out that this house was owned by is owned by Samuel Braithwaite, but he's the his his ancestor is this guy named Titus Braithwaite. He was the founder of this property, and we find out that he was very good to his servants, code for slaves, and he made all his money in shipping, again, a code for the slave trade. And maybe, or not maybe, but he had an affair with one of his slaves who ran off in a night, and the house was demolished, burned down in a fire. And Atticus is the would it be the progenitor? Oh, I'm not getting my vocabulary right here. But he's the son of these this oof I'm at loss for words here, guys. Sorry. He's the son of this union between Titus and his slave Hannah, okay, who was an escaped slave. By the way, last week I was so excited, I was so pumped, and I made a mistake with two things, two big mistakes. I want to correct them real quick. One is that Midnight at Femme is the name of the show where I heard a lot of stuff about H.P. Lovecraft. Okay, not the show that I had said. Um, some things changed over there. It used to be that show, but now it's called Midnight FM. And I think I created a word. I can't even think of the word now, but it's fictitious. I think I said fictitional. Fictitional. Anyway, it happens, guys. And by the way, don't forget to like and subscribe. You see how professional I am, right? But thank you, by the way, for all the views. Oh, I'm forgetting to do all the stuff at the beginning. Thank you, everybody, for all of the views for the last podcast. That was really cool that you guys are listening and comment. I love comments. So please comment below. Tell me what you thought of this episode. But basically, that's what we find out this episode. I mean, that's part of what we find out. The other part is it goes biblical. Okay, it goes very biblical in that we find out Samuel, he's got this complex where he wants to reach, he wants eternal life. He wants to get to that place in the Garden of Eden where Adam was naming the animals, putting everything in their place. And the show doesn't explain exactly how he plans to do this or what exactly is the deal. I'll get into that in a minute when I give you some things that I didn't like about this episode. But yes, he realizes he needs Atticus's blood in order to do this. By the way, that's a picture there of Samuel in the on the screen if you're looking on the right, and on the left is the mansion. And so that's what we find out. They lured Atticus up there, possibly by getting his father, and because the father says that he wrote the letter to Atticus under duress. So go ahead. I'm skipping around a little bit. So just to recap, we find out that Atticus is the child of Titus and his slave Anna. Therefore, he is heir, or to this mansion himself. Okay, he's a blood heir to this mansion. And because of this, Samuel, which is another child here of the Braithwaites, he realizes that he needs Atticus's blood in order to conjure up this spell to get him into like this Garden of Eden, everlasting life type deal. And we also find out where Atticus's father is. Okay, he actually had hatched an escape plan. He was out. He was out. um, when they were trying to save him, he was already, digging his way out of the um, little uh, whatever they had him in. It was almost like an underground cellar. So that was Montrose Freeman as his father, and that's pretty much it. I mean, now I'm gonna just break down some things that I liked about the episode and some things that I didn't. Um, oh, and we'll get to the end and what that means for the rest of the series. Thank you if there's anybody watching. I believe there's somebody on. Say hello if you're on, and you know, uh, join in the conversation. Okay, it's a little bit late here. I'm in Brazil. It's 12:48. I got to see the episode a little bit earlier today compared to last week, and so hopefully I'll be able to get on around this time, around 12 a.m. my time, which would be 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, guys, I thought this episode was good. Definitely was a good episode. I'm still interested in the series, still digging it, still enjoying these characters. It was a bit too choppy though, okay, in parts. Because the beginning you get into this house and I got this lost feel out of it, you know? Remember, well, those of you that are old enough to remember Lost when it first came out, and there was nothing on TV like Lost before Lost. And just this mystery of this island and what's this and what's that, and when they finally find that hatch and you're invested in this mystery every week, even though they kind of gave you like less than tidbits every week to just keep you turning in every week, right? So it was a cool feel though. It was a nice feel, and I was expecting this to go on the whole season, but as we find out at the end, this definitely does not happen. Well, I'm not giving you a spoiler for the end yet. Okay, we'll get to the end towards the end of this podcast. So but it was a cool feeling that I got inside this house, this mysterious house. We find out that there's a little bit of magic going on, which always makes me kind of look at something kind of like leery-eyed, when magic is involved. Because even though, yes, we're talking interdimensional creatures and all of this stuff, um, I wasn't expecting magic to be part of the narrative. And because sometimes magic can just be a very simplistic way to explain things away, which I don't always like in a narrative. But I think they played it off well, with the exception that they didn't really explain that well, at least not to my satisfaction, what this magic is or was, where, is it something that's an internal magic coming from these people, from the Braithrights or the Braithwhites, or is it something that they have to actually conjure up in the forest and, actually make a spell, read something out of a book? I wish that they would have explained that a little bit more. They didn't. That goes into how I thought this episode was a bit choppy. They tried to cram a lot of stuff in one episode. I thought even more than the first episode. I know I have a friend of mine who had commented that he thought the first episode was a little bit too quick with the pacing. I thought the pacing was fine for episode one. This one, I thought, hey, they're really trying to get us from point A to point B as quickly as possible. So magic just comes up out of nowhere. And we find out it's magic because Lita and Uncle George, right? Yeah, Uncle George, they can't remember anything that happened the previous night. And it's kind of a cool scene because you're like, oh my God, there's a mystery here. What's going on? How come they can't remember, but Atticus can? And then Atticus just comes up to the girl, Christina, which is the daughter of Solomon, or Samuel, sorry, and he says it's a spell. And I'm like, is it? Like, how'd you figure that out? Maybe, he's smarter than me, but it just came out of nowhere. And he's like, take the spell off them. And she explains that it's a spell that they have put around their property so that if anybody that runs into the monsters, the guardians, don't remember that experience. Okay, so I thought, I mean, it was just a little quick. Like where we could have gotten more clues to it, building up to it. Obviously, again, we're dealing with interdimensional monsters and everything like that. Uh, I guess it's not out of the question for magic to be involved, but for me, magic always goes into this other territory, which is fantasy, whereas this is kind of rooted in more sci-fi. Okay, you can disagree with that, and if you do, let me know. Because even in sci-fi, we can have monsters, right? I mean, everyone's seen the X-Files, or even Stranger Things to a level is a little bit more on a sci-fi level, horror sci-fi. And yes, 11 has some abilities, but it's never downright magic. Then we're getting into Harry Potter land, which is fine. It's another land, but not necessarily for your show early on. So now we know that magic is definitely one of the rules established for this show, and I guess I'm okay with it. I'm not a huge fan, but it's not like it's not a show killer, deal breaker. So there's a spell, okay, and as they're going around this house, there's also a little village on the edge of this property, and it's a bunch of white folks again. And that's the part where I was a little confused. I didn't know what the show wanted to. It wasn't very clear as who these folks were, if they were on the side of Atticus and his companions or not. We find out very quickly that they're not, but at the same time, they work for the Braithrights. They have a run in with this very racist lady that's guarding this tower. And again, uh, George, I think it was the uncle, said, or no, Atticus says, my father's in there. Like they just kind of surmise all this stuff just out of nowhere. I guess it's for time constraint reasons, but there wasn't really any clue. I mean, the father said, okay, the ground is made out of concrete slabs, which means there's probably a dungeon underneath, and they're like, he's there. But, what makes you say that he's there? I mean, it's obvious they don't trust these people that are taking care of them, but to jump from that to they got my dad locked up in a dungeon is a real big leap. So, yeah, it could have been done a little bit better. Okay. Um, After this, another scene that I thought was interesting, but also could have been a bit confusing, is the uncle. He goes through his room, and in his room, they've got all his favorite books. They have all the right clothes for Lita. Atticus mentions this. Don't you think this is strange that we came here, they have everything perfect for us? But they don't really explain how that's done. And also, they kind of make it clear, when Atticus is actually talking to Abigail, he says, I'm sorry, or Christina. Abby is the actress, Abby Lee. He says, I wish I hadn't brought my family into this. And then or no, you don't have to bring my family into this. And she's like, well, you brought them. Okay, so if they were expecting Atticus for sure, because I guess they tried to lure him there with his dad, but how were they able to get everything prepared for the friend Lita and the uncle George that quickly? Not exactly sure. And if they weren't really that important, why would they even care to do that? Uh, so I wish there would have been a bit more explanation on that. And also, when George is in his room and he's able to open, he finds a book and he is able to unlock the secret passage that gets him to all these other parts of the room. Why would they do that? Why would they let him find that? Like, why would they put him in a room with a secret passage if they, you'd think they wouldn't want him to find that? And why invite him to a dinner afterwards? Later on, they're invited to this dinner where they're supposed to have like this little Masonic meeting or something. There's a whole lot of stuff in this episode that worked to move the story forward. And it wasn't exactly like plot hole type stuff, but it definitely could have explained a little bit better, or led up to a little bit better. And I'm not sure if that's due to time constraints. It doesn't take away from the narrative. It's not stuff that doesn't make sense completely. It's not like I'm scratching my head like, wow, this is a complete plot hole, or like that makes absolutely no sense. But I thought this episode had a little bit more of that than the previous episode. Actually, I wrote down in my notes, how did Atticus get out of his room? I was about to go off on that, but then we found out that that's some type of a weird spell that they put on all three of them, Atticus, Lita, and George, where they would have visions of something in their heart. Atticus fought this Korean army soldier. Lita was about to get it on with Atticus, but it was, again, it's a vision of him. And we found out George had like an ex wife or something that he really was in love with. Um, and I think she passed away. So it was an interesting scene, interesting segment. But again, like, and it involved magic to the point of it. I mean, they do have an exposition afterwards, where expository, that's the word I'm looking for, where George is like, they're just trying to get into our heads, they're trying to make us go nuts and go against each other. But again, why? I think that was the biggest problem with this episode, is why are these things happening? And um, we may never get the answer, because as we find out, we're about to get to the end here, the house is no more. Okay? Or at least the people in the house who could have been a real threat are no more. And that gets us to Samuel. Samuel, which you can see here in the picture, is the one that's just trying to open up this portal, or this to this everlasting life. And he's a real bad guy. He realizes he needs Atticus, but he is not a friendly white guy. Okay, he's not. He doesn't like the fact that um, Atticus is black. In fact, none of these folks do, except for maybe his daughter. His daughter seems to not mind that much. Um, and yeah, he lets them know that I need to do a ceremony with you to open up this portal, and that's that. They try to escape Atticus after they find the father, and that's another thing. Like, it was so choppy how they were in the dinner scene, right? Because remember, I told you that they were all invited to dinner, and then all of a sudden they're in that dungeon area that they had seen before, and it was just like, how did they get down there? How did that happen exactly? It's kind of late at night. Why weren't they attacked by any of the monsters that come out in the forest? They just appeared there, and when it seemed like they were about to meet their end, Leader shows up right behind and knocks that same white lady that was guarding the dungeon earlier, or the entrance to the little tower earlier, on the head. And then it ends up the father was actually already escaped. And so they didn't even have to go down there. And then they meet up with the father as he's like digging his way out of the ground. He's been in handcuffs. And it was just really choppy. Like, that was one of the choppiest segments of the whole episode. Like, how did he get from here to there? It was like a little bit of teleportation them, even after the lady warned him the first time they met, don't be caught out here after sundown. And she seemed like she was ready to kill him. And then they run off and escape. Car gets crashed because there's these magic little, it reminded me of Star Trek when they put people in the brig, and the there's a little force field. When you touch it, you see the little force field. Just that this one will blow you back. And when that happens, Mr. Samuel Braithwaite, whatever his name is, Braithwaite, shows up in his car, shoots Lita, shoots the uncle, and brings Atticus back. And he's like, listen, you can't get out of here. Okay, you're stuck. You're stuck. Okay, so this was almost get out, but they couldn't get out because they were locked in due to these force fields. And he ends up curing Lita, but he says, and he makes a promise that he's going to cure the uncle if Atticus actually does the ceremony. And that's where the episode goes bonkers, but it's also where the episode go, gets really cool because we got some Gil Scott Heron, okay? Whitey on the Moon, which is a poem of his, which is the title of the episode. And I suggest everyone listen to that poem. And it's an audio poem. Okay, Gil Scott Heron is one of my favorite artists, so it's really good to hear him. We also got some Nina Simone this episode, which is really nice. And we got some Marilyn Manson, which is a song I really like. But again, it's a little off putting to have this modern music in there all of a sudden. I had mentioned that from the first episode, and the second episode was the same. I mean, I think they did it a little bit better. They had like two modern songs. I can't remember the first one. I just remember the Marilyn Manson one because I really like that song. Um, but kind of takes you out of the show a little bit, or makes you remember, oh, this is just a show. Uh, when before we had music of the period, and then all of a sudden, boom, here comes Marilyn Manson, like way out of left field. But when he's about to, they're doing the ceremony. We get to see some Atticus ass, so hallelujah for that. He's got a beautiful butt. Um, Atticus seems to be like, I don't know. They open up a portal to somewhere, and his hands start turning all green, like leafy green. Like leaves start to grow out of it, and then he just screams, "Wah!" And everybody turns to stone. Okay, almost like a little Sodom and Gomorrah type, or I don't know if they're pillars of salt or stone, but that's what happens. And then this pregnant woman, which I assume is Hannah, leads him out of there. Not sure if it's like a portal escape or he escapes on his own. We see that he ends up in the car where his uncle and his father are there and Lita's there. Uncle George is dead, which is a real shame because I like that character, but I think he's dead for good. And the episode kind of ends there, and you're like, what the hell just happened? So, breaking this down, okay, what I liked and what I didn't like. I kind of wish there would have been a bit more in this house. They would have explored this, whatever this is, wherever they are, a little bit more. And I can understand how that could have easily gotten into Lost territory. Like, that's one thing that would be a little bit frustrating about Lost is that you'd watch 40 minutes to get like 5 minutes real time exposition for like the characters, like, oh goodness, and then you tune in next week. But if you do it right, you can extend it, an episode or two more, and I think it would have been really interesting to find out more about what goes on in this house, what exactly the magical powers are, and what exactly Samuel was trying to do. Well, he told us what he's trying to do, but like exactly what the mechanisms behind that were, who knows? We might come back to it later in the season. I'm not sure we're completely done with the house. I'm just going from a kind of a pragmatic point of view. They did spend a lot of money on these sets for this house and everything. Be kind of crazy for it to be used only for one episode essentially, because last week all they we saw was the outside of the house. So I would imagine maybe we'd go back to this house at some point. Not sure, but it'd be nice to get more information about the house, about the creatures that are there. I mean, we had this real weird scene where I was about to say Abigail again, but Christina, the daughter, helps give birth to, I think it's called a Shogoth, okay, which is one of these Lovecraftian creatures. It's coming out of a cow, and you can see that I guess they're raising them, which is why she has some command over them. When she blows her little whistle, they go away. But I need a little bit more on that. Okay, maybe it's in the book. It does go into that. If you have spoilers, just make sure that you put spoilers in the comments, because not everybody may want spoilers on that. But I'll read it. You know, just get spoilers. Hit the tab button a couple times, the return button a couple times, and then write what you gotta write in the comments, because I would love to find out more about this house. Like for me, that was the best part of the episode, was that beginning where it's like this house of mirrors type thing. Like, what is this place? Who are these people? And it just gave it to us way too quickly and without enough of a setup, where it felt it was a bit simplistic. So that's my criticism for that. But now it it interests me though at the same time, because well, now I'm looking at a totally different show. Now we're back to Chicago. I did end up watching the previews for next episode, and they're back. And apparently they got a lot of money. So maybe we'll see a little bit more of this house as they leave, and maybe um, Atticus being the, I guess, the rightful heir now, because Samuel's dead. You know, I'm not sure what's going to happen to Christina. I don't know if the only people turned to stone were the people in that room, or if it affected the rest of the house. Yeah, because I was quick and I just saw the episode. I can't, you know, so correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was just the people in that room. So maybe Atticus gets some money out of this. I don't know. Maybe to keep quiet, go back. You got your father, and just leave us alone. I'm guessing they're gonna explain that at the beginning of next episode, because it seems like when they go back to Chicago, then they are really moving on up, and they're gonna have some money to move to a different area of the city, and who knows where the show's gonna go on that side, because we definitely need explanations to these creatures. Why are these creatures there? And I would love to again find out what's really going on in this house. Last note, as I'm about to sign off here, is I dug the father. I like the scene that he had with Uncle George, where it showed that, you know, he used to be an artist when he was a little boy. He used to draw stuff, and then his dad just smacked that artistic side out of him. And you can see why he's kind of a hard man. And George is trying to tell him, listen, you got to show some love to your son, because you might be all that he's got right now, and he may not actually be yours, which I think is something that we're definitely gonna go back to. That one seemed like it was a definite plot point that we'll go back to. But uh, I like the character though. I like that the father who is played by Michael Kenneth Williams, you know, that's Montrose Freeman. He was actually really cool. He was a really, um, I like that he wasn't happy. He wasn't happy to be rescued. Like, I didn't ask you guys to rescue me. And he's like, but, and Atticus is like, but you wrote me a letter. And he's like, yeah, I wrote it under duress. Like, you weren't actually supposed to come up here. So he is very, very, very well acted, and we'll see if this father son relationship builds a little bit. It's a shame they had to get rid of George in order to be able to make space for this other uh, strong black character. It would have been nice to see the interplay between the two brothers or two different styles at looking at Atticus. But hey, there's I guess there's only enough space for one father figure in a drama. And so let's see what comes up next, guys. Do you have any predictions? Any ideas? So far, I really enjoyed it. I was a bit critical there towards the end, but that doesn't take away any of the enjoyment that I had from this episode. Just think that, again, the pacing was a little bit off for me. A lot of quick edits, a lot of. We were at the dinner table 1 second, now we're in the dungeon the next, and then from the dungeon, we got the car waiting for the dad that's escaping out, through a tunnel that he dug, and it's like, how did all that go? I thought the whole magic out of nowhere, for me, it really just felt like it came out of nowhere. I thought it could have been presented a little bit better. And hopefully, we're not completely done with the house. Samuel seemed like he was going to be built up to a really nice villain, but he, got knocked out real quick. So we're kind of going Game of Thrones style here. Like, you know, you think it's going one way, and then all of a sudden it goes another, which is cool. I mean, if it's done right, I mean, how many of us started Game of Thrones thinking, who hadn't read the books at all, thinking, okay, this is just going to be, for me, I used to always describe it like House of Cards, medieval time. And yeah, there's a side story with a dragon, but okay. But the main story was that until eventually we saw that, okay, this is really, the dragon isn't the side story. That's like the main story, the dragon and the White Walkers. So, and that's okay. I think if it's done well, it can be a show can kind of shift in a different direction and still be really good. It doesn't have to um, keep us stuck in the same place the whole season. In fact, sometimes that could be a detriment to a show, right? Because it can get old very quickly. So I'm looking forward to what is coming up next with Lovecraft Country. Let me know in the comments what you thought of this episode. If you liked it, if you thought it was better than the first episode, if you thought it was worse. I don't remember what grade I gave the first episode. I think I gave it an 8. Um, 8 something. I'll give this one. I think I'm gonna agree with the IMDb. I think IMDb it's ranking at 8.1, whereas the first episode was ranking like at an 8.5 or 8.6. I can ride with that. I thought it was still really good, but there were a bit of weird editing and weird cuts and things that just kind of happened too quickly for my taste. All right, guys, I'm out of here. On Monday night, which is tomorrow, I'll be back with my friend Peter. We're usually on either at 10 or 11 p.m. Sao Paulo time, which is where I live, which is an hour ahead of Eastern Standard Time. So look for us either at 9 or 10 p.m. New York City Eastern Standard Time. It really depends on what time we get done work. Sorry, I wish I could give you a definite time. Sunday nights, it's Lovecraft Country. And again, it depends on when it is that I'm able to watch. It comes on at 9. So here in Brazil, it's 10 p.m. But sometimes I can only get around to it at 11. And Thursday nights, we have Star Trek Lower Decks. And you can check out that playlist. And that's it. I'm always around, and we'll be talking about a whole lot of stuff. Okay, so Monday nights are what we're watching, where we talk about things that we've watched during the week. Thursdays, Star Trek. Sunday, Lovecraft Country. I'll see you guys next week. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the page, and have a great week, guys. I'll see you soon.